Okay, so we're always hearing about Greenland, right? That its massive ice sheet is melting. It's a fact that's constantly in the news, but honestly, the numbers can feel so abstract in the doomsday scenarios, a little overwhelming. So what's really happening up there? Let's get into the actual data and figure out what the future might really look like. To really wrap our heads around the stakes, let's start with a huge what if. What would actually happen if Greenland's entire ice sheet just vanished? It's a super dramatic scenario, I know, but thinking about this extreme case is the best way to put everything else into perspective.
And here's the number that answers that question. If the whole thing melted, it would raise global sea levels by 7.4 meters. That's nearly 24 feet. Wow! That's a truly civilization-altering amount of water. But, and this is a really important but, that single massive number doesn't even come close to telling the whole story.
So let's really unpack that 7.4 meter figure. To make any sense of it, we have to look at how fast the ice is actually melting right now and see where Greenland fits into the, bigger global climate puzzle. Okay, as of right now, the ice sheet is losing about 266 billion tons of ice every single year. It's just a staggering number, right? But the key thing to remember is that it's a measurable rate. It's not like a dam suddenly breaking. Think of it more like a massive, accelerating river of ice flowing into the sea. And it's a river we can literally track with satellites. And this gives us some really crucial perspective. All that melting from Greenland, it's responsible for about a quarter of the total sea level rise we're seeing today. So yeah, it's a huge player, no doubt. But it also reminds us that it's just one piece of a much larger system. You still got Antarctica and, the simple fact that warmer water just expands. And that brings us to a really critical part of this whole conversation. When the stakes are this high, it's so easy for myths and Hollywood-style disaster scenarios to take over. So let's take a minute and separate the cinematic hype from the scientific reality. So one of the biggest fears you see is this idea of a sudden, catastrophic flood. Entire cities just swallowed by a wave. The reality? It's a lot less dramatic, but it's just as serious. Sea level rise is a slow, gradual process. We're talking millimeters per year, which adds up over decades and centuries. The good news there is that it gives us time to prepare, not to panic. And just look at the timescale we're talking about here. Even if melt rates accelerate, a complete melt of the entire ice sheet, well, that would likely take thousands of years. This isn't a problem that's going to be solved in the next decade. It's a profound, long-term challenge that's going to span many, many generations. And then there's the Hollywood favorite, right? The instant ice age, just like in The Day After Tomorrow. The actual science is way more nuanced. All that fresh meltwater will probably weaken the Atlantic's big current system, the AMOC. And yeah, that could lead to some mild regional cooling in parts of Europe, but the scientific consensus is pretty clear. It is not going to be an abrupt, catastrophic collapse. So look, this isn't about denying the problem at all. It's about reframing it. The real challenge isn't stopping some overnight catastrophe. It's about managing a slow, persistent change that's going to unfold over centuries. And this long-term reality really shifts the conversation. It moves it towards economics, because the changing Greenland presents not just these immense costs and risks, but also some, pretty unexpected opportunities. The trade-offs here are pretty stark. On the negative side, obviously, we're facing billions, probably trillions, in costs to defend our coastal cities. But as the ice retreats, it's also uncovering valuable mineral deposits, like rare earth elements. It's creating massive amounts of sand that can be exported, and it's potentially opening up completely new routes for global trade. And one of the biggest economic game changers could be in global shipping. Think about it. As the Arctic sea ice disappears, new routes are opening up that could be 40% shorter than going through the Suez or Panama canals. This could totally reshape global trade, saving companies billions in fuel and time. It's a really complex trade-off with just huge implications. So, given this slow-moving but incredibly profound change, the conversation has to shift from panic to pragmatism. How do we actually adapt? What are the real human responses that are being planned and explored right now? Well, the response strategy really has three main parts. First, we defend. We have to build smarter coastal infrastructure, learning from places like the Netherlands. Second, we intervene. This means exploring really ambitious geoengineering ideas, like giant underwater curtains designed to physically block warm ocean water from melting glaciers from below. And third, of course, we mitigate. We absolutely have to keep cutting global emissions to slow down the warming that's causing this whole problem in the first place. And innovation is just going to be key.
This means figuring out how to sustainably get to these new resources, investing big in green technology, and even exploring some pretty wild ideas like using drones to manage snow accumulation to try and help recharge the ice sheet. Human ingenuity is already being thrown at this massive challenge.
So, when you step back and look at the full picture, the real timelines, the economic trade-offs, and our incredible capacity to adapt, the story of Greenland's ice really changes. It becomes less about an imminent apocalypse and a lot more about a massive, multi-generational engineering and economic challenge. So I think the real question becomes, are we ready to manage it?